in fact, not just Assam, but the Northeast itself is linguistically very rich. You think of botany and philosophy. What is the difference in the way they would use language? One is an empirical science, and the other is a kind of philosophical.
This is the emphasis on these two aspects: hands-on training and capacity building.
Now, for example, you can think of a Sanskrit student would hardly require to learn Sanskrit to go and buy a kilo of potatoes from the market.
Right.
But she would definitely need it to understand some commentary on, let's say, Bhagavad Gita, Kalidas. They would take a paper from a very raw position and give enough time to handhold the student to a point where the publication happens. We have these days a very strict requirement that students would have to produce research papers before they submit. Now, how do they learn to write the research paper? I'm also still learning about how we can make ourselves more useful. As a retired person, I may have retired, but I'm still a committed member of the university community, and that's how I'd like to think of myself.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Chai Chatters Chapters, a podcast from Gauhati University. Today we have with us Professor Jyotiprakash Tamuli sir, retired Professor of Linguistics, Gauhati University. A warm welcome to you, sir, to Gauhati University once again.
Thank you, Dhurjati. This is indeed a pleasure to be here today and to be able to go back in time to talk about my rewarding experience of teaching at Gauhati University.
Thank you, sir, and welcome once again. So, sir, you have served at Gauhati University for close to 4 decades, and you have been entrusted with many responsibilities, duties throughout your long career at Gauhati University.
That's right.
And in the course of your academic career, you have also traveled abroad, and you have been to the UK twice, once for the Commonwealth Academic Staff Academic Staff Scholarship in 1989 to 1993, and the second one, the Commonwealth Academic Staff Fellowship UK for 2 years, 2009.
No, that was actually, it straddled 2 years, but it was for 6 months.
Okay.
By that time, the fellowship was made shorter.
Okay.
But then that was a very concentrated time and a very rewarding at the same time. So it was a different experience from that of the PhD experience.
So take us on a journey of this 4-decade-long career. How was it like being at Gauhati University? So take us on a brief journey through time.
Well, it was in 1984 that I joined as a regular faculty. But before that, I was serving for about 2 years as a part-time ad hoc lecturer in the Department of Linguistics. And then I retired in 2022, end of December 2022, which makes it about 40 years. 4 decades is a long time, and I don't really know how that passed. And it has been a really eventful time, and it would be great to talk about my experience, personal and professional, at the university. If I can briefly tell you about
Please. Yes.
the people who have inspired me in the journey in Gauhati University. Well, I am actually second generation teacher at Gauhati University. My father, Binoy Kumar Tamuli, was the head of Department of Mathematics. He retired in 1985. And it was during the time that we spent at the university campus and later on at Gauhati, Uzan Bazar, where we shifted to later on, that I had the idea. I saw, in fact, him getting many scholars from abroad, particularly those who would come for some kind of academic visit, he would take the opportunity of inviting them and getting his colleagues or his research scholars or PG students to attend some of the talks that these scholars would give. And I remember one Professor Nelson Max. He is now a senior professor at the University of Southern California, I believe. Then there was Professor Higman, who was a professor of mathematics at Oxford University.
Okay.
So these were the people who were in my mind, and later on, as I will hope to tell you, how that inspired me to follow a similar track in my own teaching career. And then, of course, Professor Rohini Kumar Mohanto was the founder head of Linguistics department, and it was he who gave me a very robust perspective on linguistics. He was himself trained at the University College London at the SOAS School of Oriental and African Studies, where he did his PhD under Professor Eugenie Henderson, a very eminent linguist of the time. And I don't know whether you are familiar with The Count of Monte Cristo. There's a by Alexandre Dumas novel, and an analogy comes to mind. There was this Abbe Feria, a priest who gave a lot of knowledge and insight about life and living to Edmond Dante.
Right.
And so apart from the prison analogy, which doesn't fit, of course, but I think I got a lot of information and insight about language, about the pragmatics of academics during the time that I got to spend with Professor Mohanta over a cup of tea. And I really am very grateful and I'm happy to recall him at this point. The third person I would like to mention here is Professor Anita Tamuli, my wife, and a professor and head of Department of English Language Teaching. She retired in 2019, but she and I together started a program which would not have been possible but for her wholehearted support. So although many people think of us as a husband and wife team, we actually took a lot of work home and worked on them, as I hope I'll be able to focus on as we go on discussing some of the things that we will come up.
So you joined the university as a faculty in the early 80s, and throughout your career you have had many academic collaborations both nationally as well as internationally. So could you please tell us about the situation then and now? How was it like being in the 90s, and how has the situation changed for the better or worse in the present time? So could you please sort of take us on a comparative perspective?
That is quite a bit of change that has happened. As we know today, the whole world is at our fingertip. The technology has made the world really small, and we can reach out to people at any point of time, anywhere. But those days we had to communicate through letters, which would take ages to reach and get a response to. That is just one of the examples I'm saying. But there were also other problems, like Assam was not well connected with the mainland India, and unlike now. So for scholars to come to this part of the country was not very easy. And there was this general mindset of kind of self-sufficiency. I think that was one aspect. The other aspect I would like to bring up here is the challenge that we have today from the global players as well as others, the corporate sector, both in terms of the teaching learning as well as the kind of research facilities that are on offer. And earlier there was a kind of an undisputed place for Gauhati University, which still thankfully continues to be the case, I would like to believe. But we have, I think, we have had to take note of how the new challenges have to be faced and some measures had to be put in place. So let me give you some concrete examples of how all this made us in the department take some decisions which were I look back, were inevitable in a way. You see, by the end of the 90s, when Professor Mahanta retired, I think around 1997, the quality of students coming for linguistics was very poor, and very often he would have to dictate some kind of notes to the students to enable them to pass. And I remember him telling me on one occasion, "Moi to hehe hoi gelo." That was, we used to break into Kamrupi often, underlining our common background. Tomaloke ki para kora. So that was when I started in 1998 an admission program, a test program, admission test program, which would enable us to filter some of the students, and that was in the interest of serving the goals of higher education better. And so that was one aspect. Then also because of the job opportunity being very far and few in between, so we could not make much headway with linguistics. So in the meantime, ELT was also struggling because it was a postgraduate diploma course or some such course was, I remember it was a diploma course, but then both of us, the two departments, and it helped that Mrs. Tamuli, Anita Tamuli was the head of ELT at that time, and we decided to jointly float a program called Linguistics and ELT. And that had many advantages. One was that students were offered a choice of doing either linguistics or ELT, and we made it open to students from all streams. So students from science could join us, and mostly, of course, humanities students came and joined us. So, and the program was really successful, and we ran it from 2000 to 2022 when it was finally wound up.
So we were thinking, how do you connect these developments with the present day emphasis on, say, capacity building and hands-on training? Because we are presently looking at an education system with courses which have relevance in terms of making or enabling people to be employable.
That's right.
In businesses apart from academics.
Thank you.
In avenues apart from academics.
That's a
so
very
what
good
is
point.
the emphasis on these two aspects, hands-on training and capacity building?
I'm so glad you brought this up. In fact, I should have also told you about the perception among the teaching community at that time that our job is just to teach, and not to look out for employing them. That's not our lookout. And I remember feeling very uncomfortable about that idea. I was a junior faculty at that time, so I didn't have much say, but I felt that sooner or later we would have to take on the responsibility of ensuring through our curriculum, through our teaching, to make the students job enabled. And towards that end, we introduced academic English, and we introduced field work for the students, and that was linguistic field work, going to the field, collecting data, handling, recording technical equipments, technical tape recorders and stuff which are now digital. All that skill was possible because LELT, thankfully, was also the MA program, was the occasion when many foreign scholars coming to the region by themselves to do field work, because Assam, as you know, is and in fact not just Assam, but the Northeast itself is linguistically very rich. Many of the languages, in fact, are small languages which are at the point of being endangered, and that was one reason why many of my colleagues from Australia, from France, from UK, from USA would come to do fieldwork. And one of the scholars, Professor Dr. Stephen Moray, told me once that, Jyoti, why don't we sit together and have an exchange of ideas? We come, we collect our data and we fly back. Why don't we meet at some place like Gauhati or some other place in the Northeast and have a conference? So that was the beginning of the Northeast Indian Linguistics Society, where I was one of the co-chairs. And Stephen Moray was another, an American scholar at that time, young scholar called Mark Post. He worked on the Tani language, very good grammar he wrote. So three of us, we started the society. And there was a time when students were not able to speak in English. They didn't have, and those of them who could speak were not having enough confidence to do a presentation.
Okay, sir.
So my friends, these colleagues, they took on themselves to actually give them hands-on practice on how to present, how to write a paper. In fact, I remember one session in the Northeast Indian Linguistics Society conference held in Shillong, Shillong had a session on how to write academic papers.
Okay.
And we used some of the very hands-on practices to enable some of our students to write.
So this also becomes some kind of empowerment.
Empowerment, and such empowerment that later on, as the conference happened every year, that is only since last 3 or 4 conferences, it became 2 yearly, because every year it was difficult to handle, especially COVID came and so on. But till about 2015 or so, we had annual conferences, and students earlier, as one colleague from Delhi, Professor Satyanath, Shobha Satyanath, remarked that when she came early Neil conferences, there were hardly any contributions from local scholars. But as the conference proceeded, from one year to the other, there were more contributions locally. And when I say locally, from Tejpur University, from Gauhati University, of course, but Shillong and Manipur and so on, colleagues came, the faculty members came, they sent their students, and ultimately all these were crystallized in the form of Northeast Indian Linguistics. There's a series of books you will find in the internet, and they have been very well subscribed. You'll find them all over the world. Why? Because the editors, my colleagues, were very meticulous in editing the submissions, unlike in journals where, the rejection, it's either rejection or acceptance, the black and white situation is not there. They would take a paper from a very raw position and give enough time to handhold the student to a point where the publication happens. So that was one unique aspect of this conference I would like to bring attention to.
So can we then envision, or can we sort of explore the possibility of a wider ecology of language? Because as we saw, that language here is not just limited to language study, but it has had a wider and more entrenched engagement with community development.
Absolutely.
We recently, in our university, we had a conference where we explored the Eastern Himalayan cultures.
Yes.
Right. So I'm sure the language ecology or language has a role to play in sort of bringing about transdisciplinary transformation in humanities. So can you just sort of tell us something about your opinion on this particular faculty within language to transcend its own boundaries?
Yes.
And also empower other disciplines.
Yes, this has in fact been my feeling, that we need to look at our responsibilities for bringing awareness about the role of language, the role that language can play in the empowerment of other disciplines. And in fact, I have to thank my ELT colleagues for bringing this to my attention, because during the MA program I realized that, the model of language proficiency that we have, which is exclusively literature based, is not working well for other disciplines. I remember somewhere around 2004 or 5, there was an effort by the science faculty to actually eliminate English, because they thought English was literature related, so they wanted rather an IT paper. And I remember Professor Krishna Gopal Bhattacharjee, who was the Dean of Faculty of Science at that time, they invited us to give a presentation, and I hastened to assure them that English language is called a service discipline, like statistics. It is at the service of other subjects, and that's how we started a course called Functional English, which met with a lot of skepticism at that point, but right now I think even some of the critics have realized that we need to empower language in the students, or not only of literature, that I would put it this way, that the literature students are one of the consumers of language, but there are other consumers of language like botany and zoology and so on, A to Z you can say. And for that we need to take a functional perspective on language, particularly on skill development.
Right.
Skill language as a skill subject is often not recognized. Basically, when we talk of skill, if I can quickly tell you about how important it is that we take a skill perspective on language. And of course, when I say skill, of course, because language is a cognitive matter, knowledge naturally comes. You don't operate on a vacuum. So knowledge of the particular discipline, but the function in which the language would serve in that discipline. Now, if you think of botany and philosophy, what is the difference in the way they would use language? One is an empirical science,
Right.
and the other is a kind of philosophical, it's got to do with ideas and thoughts.
Right.
So obviously the language has to cater for the needs of the disciplines accordingly, and that's how I got more and more interested in exploring language across the curriculum perspectives. And so if you look at the world today, they're moving from a monodisciplinary perspective to a transdisciplinary perspective as far as the role of language is concerned. So there is obviously a core language content, but there is each discipline has its own duty to do. Like if there is, as I said, in the case of botany, if you think of experimentation, that is a natural thing, right? They would do experiments and there would be hypotheses and so on, and whether the experiment would bear out the hypothesis and so on. You don't have a similar approach to using language in philosophy, where there will be more reflective ratiocination, rational argumentation and so on. So how do we actually cater for the needs of these disciplines? And without going too much into detail, I would like to say that long has the establishment expected the language departments to be able to serve these disciplines' needs. But you can imagine that one department or one faculty cannot cater to the needs of all the different departments and faculties. So we are looking at a point where each department would develop the expertise in language that is relevant to their own needs, and I think that is something of an empowerment that we need to do for the students as well as the faculty members, so that the faculty members themselves, like who could teach the botany students the kind of English they need better than the botany teacher. She would know the subject well. And so for physics also, or for history. So we are moving towards what is called a disciplinary literacy perspective.
Correct.
That is the term which is used these days. So, and I'm trying my best to raise awareness about this need, and that way I hope that we can create, a body of students who can be articulate with their thoughts and research, not only in writing but in speech, because we are and also of course we are talking, although we can talk about this generally in relation to English, but we also need to think about this for Assamese or other languages.
This is what, sir, I may be asking you, because going forward, as the new education policy emphasizes the importance of mother language, mother tongues, and we're also talking about a more multilingual learning environment. So how do you see the university going ahead with a policy of multilingualism, and also the role of language studies or linguistics in this particular condition? How do you envision the increasing role of language studies in this changing environment in the coming days?
Well, language education, it's been my kind of feeling all along that language education is one of the Cinderellas of our discipline. Its role has not been properly recognized, and we need to take steps to give language its role, proper role that it deserves, and not just introduce a content without regard to the needs. So you must be aware, in management sciences they talk of needs analysis.
Right.
So we need to look at learner needs or learning needs. What does the student need to learn the language for? Now, for example, you can think of a Sanskrit student would hardly require to learn Sanskrit to go and buy a kilo of potatoes from the market.
Right.
But she would definitely need it to understand some commentary on, let's say, Bhagavad Gita or let's say Kalidas, the language of commentaries and the scholarly language. Similarly, for other disciplines like science disciplines, you can think of the language of experimentation. And here NEP has allowed us to look at the Bloom's hierarchy of
taxonomy and
what is it called now? Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy. And accordingly, right now I'm very sorry to say that we are still at the lower rungs of the hierarchy. We are mostly concerned with recall questions or narrating questions and so on, or generally thinking along those frameworks. But we need to take our students to a point where they can be concerned with the higher language functions, like arguing, like drawing conclusions, giving reasons for the conclusions and so on. And this also brings me to research capacity development. In fact, I don't think in our discussion we brought up the term capacity development, but if you come to think about it, capacity development is at the heart of all venture, I would say. And to give you an example, we have these days a very strict requirement that students would have to produce research papers before they submit. Now, how do they learn to write the research paper? We make the requirement, yes, but if we do not give them support, then they are likely to go to undertake means that would not be ethical, and we can hardly blame them for that. So I have had a discussion with the Vice Chancellor about this, and I think he is also going to take measures to ensure that the students get some kind of support, research support, in terms of the courses that they need to undergo, small modular courses, which brings me to the MMTTC, which was the earlier HRDC. There are many FDPs run there, and they're very good there, that they're very efficient and sincere, but the programs somehow I think can be further reformed in terms of taking smaller chunks, like how to write an introduction to the research paper and how to conclude. I'm just taking some, or how to do a literature review. So, and that can be thought of in terms of smaller segments of users, like in a more homogeneous, let's say the social science students, or the earth science students, or the humanities students, and then running them in terms of hands-on practice. I mean, it's a long journey, but somehow we have to undertake it.
Thank you, sir. I mean, this discussion with you has been an eye-opener, because we have always envisioned language as something, as an add-on component, you know, which is somewhat remains subservient to other disciplines. But obviously your comments, your vision has actually sensitized us towards the primary role that language has been playing all along. It's not something that is envisioned for the future, but language has played a stellar role in also enabling disciplines, empowering students and researchers all the way along. And the need of the hour is for us to start appreciating its role and to make it more worthwhile.
And undertaking programs and strategies that would help the students as well as the faculty to go ahead and compete with the world and get the position that we all, I think, deserve in the committee of academics and nation generally.
Great. Thank you so much, sir, for your inputs, for your comments, observations, for your insights into various things that possibly we did not know, and for many things that you shared in the course of our conversation. And we are earnestly looking forward to having you someday again with us. So on this note, we bring this conversation to a closure. Once again, many thanks to you, sir, for taking time out of your schedule and coming here and engaging with highly insightful conversation with us. So, sir, we wish you all the best. May you stay healthy throughout and keep enlightening us, keep educating us forward. And we look forward to having you once again, sir.
Thank you. You've been very lavish in your praise of what I do. I'm also still learning about how we can make ourselves more useful. As a retired person, I may have retired, but I'm still a committed member of the university community, and that's how I'd like to think of myself. And I really am grateful to you for this opportunity that you gave me, and to the university authorities for giving this opportunity for sharing some of these thoughts.
Thank you so much, sir. Stay well, stay happy, and we will see you soon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.